Alright, how's everybody doing today? Back again with another video for you guys. And today, we got another comparison video, this time between the Moto X Pure Edtion and the Motorola DROID Turbo, first generation. So, y'all know how we do these comparison videos. We gonna get into this. We gonna compare everything. And this is strictly for y'all to make your decision over which device is better. And in my opinion, we're going to throw my opinion in at the very end. Y'all already know, in terms of devices, my Moto X Pure Edtion is considered the king, because I've been using it for quite a while, and I really do love this device. And y'all already know from my crazy deals video, I'm searching for a device that can unseat the king. So that being said, let's jump into this. Now, the first thing I want to talk to you guys about in terms of these devices is the overall build quality on each device. Now let's start off with the Moto X Pure Edtion. Now y'all already know how I feel about this. This device is built really, really well. It's got a solid build quality overall. It feels great in the hand. There's no creaking. There's no rattling. This is really, really constructed well from a build quality standpoint. Now, over here on the DROID Turbo, we could pretty much say much of the same. It's built really well. It feels really solid in the hand. There's no creaking or rattling of any kind whatsoever. So from a build quality standpoint, both of these devices are constructed quite well. Up next, now let's talk displays on these devices. So let's start over here with the DROID Turbo. So up front, dead center here, as you can see, we have a 5.2 inch quad HD display that's 2560 by 1440p, and the display on this guy is great. No issues with the display whatsoever. And let me just show you guys real fast, just so you know. There it is. It's got a pixel screen density of 564. But overall, guys, in terms of display, the display on this does get quite bright, as you can see right there. It kind of makes it overpower the camera on the Note 3 that I'm using to take this video with, because y'all already know my primary video taker is the Moto X Pure Edtion. But since we got to do this comparison video, I had to fall back to my Note 3. And as you can see, it's so bright, it's overpowering the camera somewhat. But the display on the DROID Turbo is a really, really solid display, and I've had no issues with it. That being said, let's jump over here on the Moto X Pure Edtion, and pretty much, guys, it's more of the same. The display on this guy is really, really solid. It gets really, really bright, and I'm having no issues with the display. And I apologize again, because the brightness is going to overpower the camera on the Note 3 again. But as you can see, as it adjusts, the display is really, really solid. Really solid indeed. So, and again, it's another quad HD panel. This one is a 5.7 inch quad HD panel, and this one has a screen density of 520. But overall, the display on the Moto X Pure Edtion is really, really solid. So that's it for the displays on these guys. Now, let's talk software and hardware on each device. Let's start over here with the Moto X Pure Edtion. Hardware wise, we have a 5.7 inch quad HD display. We have a 5 megapixel front facing camera with LED flash. We have a dual front firing speakers on this guy, which create really solid sound, as you will see when we get to the Wi-Fi test and the speaker test. We have a 21 megapixel camera on the back with LED flash, and overall we have 3 gigs of RAM with 16 gigs of storage with micro SD card expansion of up to 128 gigs. And I could tell you that works perfectly. Y'all already know I have a 128 gig card in here. That's what I used to shoot my videos, and it works perfectly. Software wise, we're running a pretty stock build of Android 6.0 Marshmallow with Motorola's custom tweaks in here. So you got gestures, you got voice commands, you can wave your hand over the screen to do stuff, you can hold it up to your ear to do stuff, just like that. And we're running 6.0 Marshmallow on here. Let me pull it up so you guys can see, and you can see it's a really stock affair, and that's one of the things that I've come to love about Motorola, now owned by Lenovo. But you can see we're running Marshmallow on that guy. But other than that, you have your gestures, you have your voice commands. So when I say gestures, you can wave your hand over the screen, and you could do, this is your Moto display. Now, you could say stuff while the screen is off, like, okay, Moto X. And you could do voice commands, so like, what is the weather today? If it caught that. What is the weather today? Yeah, it's not catching it too well, but you can do that as well.
Opening YouTube.
Oh, well, it caught it now, but
okay, what would you...
It's too late now. That's not what I was trying to do. But you could do those Motorola commands, no problem. You can, other things you can do in terms of software, you could twist to launch the camera, so it goes straight into the camera. You could chop it to turn on the flashlight, and with the so big device, I always have issues chopping to turn on the flashlight, but you can do that, and you could chop to turn it off. Like I said, you could pick it up to ask it voice commands without saying it out loud. So useful stuff, and that's what I like about Motorola. And they only, pretty much in my opinion, they only tweak what they deem to be useful. Let me turn these displays down because it's really bright and it's messing with the camera, so let me turn these down. Alright, so yeah, that's pretty much it for the software experience on the Moto X Pure Edtion. And again, this is going to get very repetitive, but let's now talk software and hardware on the Droid Turbo here. So it's pretty much the same. We have a 5.2-inch Quad HD display. We have a 2 megapixel front-facing camera there. We have one front-facing speaker. We have capacitive buttons down here at the bottom that do light up once touched. And on the back here, we have a 21 megapixel camera, right? And pretty much in terms of software, we're running Android 5.1 Lollipop, but again, we have all of Motorola's features, so you can swipe over to interact with it without turning on the phone. You could say things like, okay, Droid Turbo, and use your voice commands. I don't think it caught it. Okay, Droid Turbo. What's the weather like today? And there you go, you can ask it the weather.
Today's forecast for Melbourne is 89 degrees and partly cloudy.
And again, you could do similar stuff like you could do on your Moto X Pure Edtion. So you can twist it so to launch the camera. You know, you could chop it twice to turn on the flashlight. Again, I always have an issue doing this, but it does work. Yeah, but it does work. I have issues getting it to chop to launch the flashlight, and other things. So pretty much, and again, it's pretty much a stock software experience on here. So that's that. And in terms of storage, you have 32 gigs of storage on this guy with no micro SD card expansion. So that pretty much does it for the hardware and the software on these two phones right here. Now, let's get into the next thing. Let's talk about the glitches, stutters, and crashes on these guys. Now, let's start off with the Moto X Pure Edtion here. In terms of glitches, stutters, and crashes, we don't really have any glitches or crashes, but I do notice that when I'm in YouTube or in other apps with a lot of apps open, it does get a little laggy or a little slow, but other than that, no other issues. Over here on your Droid Turbo, I'm very happy to report there's no issues with this guy. There's no glitches, there's no stutters, there's no crashes, there's no lagginess at all. So this is a very solid device with no issues. Alright, so now let's keep it moving and let's talk about the Wi-Fi in these guys. So let's start with the Droid Turbo over here. And again, you're going to hear much of the same. So we have 802.11, BGNN, and AC Wi-Fi. So what does that mean? You have support for your 2.4 gigahertz band and your 5 gigahertz band. And I got to tell you guys, from a Wi-Fi standpoint, this guy works perfectly. I had no issues with the Wi-Fi whatsoever on this guy. Let me turn it down because it's really messing with the camera here. So now let's just pull it up so you guys can see. I'm going to go in, and you can see no issues with the Wi-Fi whatsoever on this guy, and no issues with the data at all, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So, next, which is more of the same, let's talk about the Wi-Fi on the Moto X Pure Edtion, and again, it has 802.11 BGNN AC Wi-Fi, and there's really no issues with the Wi-Fi whatsoever that I have experienced. And let me just go ahead and pull it up here for you guys. And again, this is where we see a slight performance differentiation, because although the Wi-Fi on both of these guys are solid, you get much better Wi-Fi speeds on your Moto X Pure Edtion, whether it be the 2.4 gigahertz band or the 5 gigahertz band. And I really have to equate that to the new modems and chips inside of the Moto X Pure Edtion here. That being said, the Droid Turbo is no slouch, and they both perform really solidly when it comes to Wi-Fi. So now what I'm going to do for you guys is we're going to find a YouTube video so you can see it all in real time, and this will also give you a chance to hear how the speakers sound on each of these devices. Let me just go over to my videos and we'll find one of my videos here. This way I don't run into any copyright issues. So we're just going to pull up one of my videos here. Let's go with this one. And yeah, let's go with that one. Alright, so now we're just going to go ahead and let y'all hear the speakers and see how the Wi-Fi performs. So let's start with the Droid Turbo here. So I'm going to play a few seconds. And we have another video sample here. This one's at Quad HD resolution. And man, if this part doesn't look beautiful. Alright, we're just going to do a slow pan. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And again, this is a 16 megapixel camera that is on the Samsung Note Edge. Alright, I'm gonna get one more angle. And again, alright, so now we're gonna jump over here to the Moto X Pure Edtion, and we're going to do the same thing. And we have another video sample here. This one's at Quad HD resolution. And man, if this park doesn't look beautiful. Alright, we're just going to do a slow pan. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And again, wow. Alright, so as you guys can see, there's no issues with the Wi-Fi on either device, and the Wi-Fi performs really solidly on either device. So that's it for the Wi-Fi. Now, next, let's talk about bands. And for more information on any of these things on either device, please check the links down below so you can see links to the full reviews or things of that nature. If you want to see more camera samples for each device, please check out my camera samples playlist. But now, let's talk about the bands on each device. Now, I'm going to breeze through this quite quickly. Let's start with the Motorola Pure Edtion here. And this phone here really does support pretty much any carrier and any band. All you have to do is drop your SIM card in and you're good to go. And yes, it even works on Verizon. So, no issues with this guy, and this guy pretty much works on everybody. Now, take a little bit of a down slant. The Moto X, the DROID Turbo, pretty much works on any GSM carrier, and it does work on Verizon as well, as it was originally on Verizon to start with, and then they got unlocked. It does not work on Sprint, but if your GSM carrier supports the necessary bands, you should be good to go. And those bands are, I don't remember the particular numbers, but I know the bands. So it's band 2, band 3, band 4, band 7, and band 13. Those are the LTE bands. It supports all of the GSM bands, all of the HSPA bands, and all of the HSPA plus bands. But for you to get LTE on your carrier, you have to make sure it supports those LTE bands that I've stated. So that's the bands for each of these devices here. Now, moving on, let's talk about the Bluetooth in these guys. Now, for the Moto X Pure Edtion, we have Bluetooth 4.1, I believe, and I had no issues with the Bluetooth on this Moto X Pure Edtion. I've hooked it up to speakers, I've hooked it up to other devices, I've hooked it up to headphones, I've even paired it up to my computer, and I've had no issues with the Bluetooth. Now, the same can be said of the DROID Turbo. This one has a little bit older Bluetooth in it, as Bluetooth 4.0, but I've had no issues with the Bluetooth on this guy either, and I paired it up to just as much stuff, no issues with the Bluetooth. Alright, now next, let's get into the GPS on these devices. Let's start with the DROID Turbo here. Let me just pull it up real fast. Alright, now GPS wise, I've had no issues with the GPS on the DROID Turbo or turn-by-turn navigation. It locks onto my location within seconds, and I've had no issues whatsoever. As you can see from this test, and I would say it took about 1 to 3 seconds to lock on during this test, it's accurate up to 10 feet. So the GPS on this DROID Turbo is actually really solid. Now, let's jump over here to the Moto X Pure Edtion, and again, you can say more of the same. The GPS on this device is really solid, and I've had no issues with it. No issues whatsoever. Now let me just jump in here and show you guys if I can find it real fast. And again, it locked on within seconds, and it's accurate again to 10 feet. And again, if I had to put a number to it, it locked on between 1 and 3 seconds, and I had no issues with turn-by-turn navigation or anything of that nature. So the GPS on either of these devices is really, really solid. Now, I gotta say this because it happened, so I gotta point it out. Now, y'all already know I have a smartphone mount that's in my car that I mount my smartphones to, and I use the GPS in my car. This is where the bigger device has an issue. Now, in my smartphone mount, when I put my Moto X Pure Edtion in there, it has a tendency to be too heavy for my mount. So if y'all pick up a smartphone mount, y'all may have that issue with the weight being a little bit too heavy, and it does tend to droop while I drive. That's just an issue I had to point out. I didn't have any issues like that with my Droid Turbo, but I just wanted to point that one out. Now, next, let's talk about the call quality and the speaker calls on each device. Now, when it comes to call quality on the Moto X Pure Edtion, we're going to start over here. I had no issues whatsoever. The calls were crisp and clear, and I didn't have any issues whatsoever. And the speaker calls were really good. And I can tell y'all I've been using this for a while. I have no issues with the speaker calls. Now, again, it's a little bit more of the same when we jump over here to the Droid Turbo. Again, the call quality was pretty good. I had no issues with the call quality, and my caller said they could hear me very crisp and clearly, and it was quite loud. Now, where it takes a hit is the speaker calls. I do wish that the speaker calls on the Droid Turbo did get a little bit louder. I actually found myself trying to crank it a little bit, only to find that it was already maxed out. So it did have that issue during speaker calls, but it is what it is. So now let's move on and let's talk about the cameras in these guys. So from a camera interface perspective, these devices are pretty much the same. The interfaces are the same. The layout are the same. It's pretty much a carbon copy on each device. Now, where these devices differ is that, one, in the front-facing camera, you can't do slow motion video capture, and you don't have a front-facing flash on your Droid Turbo, and you have a 2 megapixel instead of a 5 megapixel, so you can do more with the front-facing cameras on the Moto X Pure Edtion than you could on the Droid Turbo, but it's very slightly. Now, both of these cameras, both of the main cameras, are 21 megapixels. They both have LED flash. They both record in 1080p, slow motion 720p, and UHD 4K. And let me just point this out. When you're shooting, oh, it's down here. When you're shooting these videos, however, you got to be mindful of this. Although they do have the same megapixel count, they do vary slightly. Alright? When you're taking videos and you want that widescreen format, it's actually going to use 15.5 megapixels out of the 21 megapixels to get that widescreen 16:9, whereas over here on the Moto X Pure Edtion, you're going to be using 16.1 megapixels to get that 16:9. But to take advantage of the full 21 megapixels, you will have to shoot in the 4:3 aspect ratio, so it will get a little letterboxy, but it is what it is. That's what you have to deal with if you want to take advantage of all 21 megapixels. Now, it does vary slightly again when we talk about the front-facing cameras on these devices. Now, to take full advantage of the 2 megapixel camera on the Droid Turbo, you have to shoot in widescreen. If you want to do that 4x3, you got to bump it down to 1.6 megapixels. Whereas over here on the Motorola Pure Edition, let me get it out here, to take full advantage of the 5 megapixel resolution here. I didn't mean to snap that picture. Alright, there we go. Get it in landscape. To take full advantage of the 5 megapixel resolution, you have to shoot in 4x3. So if you want that widescreen format, you're going to be bumped down to 3.8 megapixels. So a little bit of differentiation between the two, but it is what it is. And keep in mind, the Droid Turbo does not have front-facing flash, whereas the Moto X Pure Edition does. So that's pretty much it for the cameras on these devices. And I have to tell you that overall, the cameras on either of these devices are pretty good. Pretty good indeed. And follow me on Google Plus for all of these camera samples. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you've already seen a ton of camera samples for the Moto X Pure Edition. But if you want to see all the camera samples for the Droid Turbo, please continue to follow me on Google Plus. I'll have it in there when I post it, so you know what samples came from what. But if you want to see all the camera samples, please follow me on Google Plus. Alright, so all in all, that's pretty much covers it for the cameras. Again, if you want to see photos or video samples for the photos, follow me on Google Plus. For the video samples, please check out my video samples playlist on YouTube, so you can see the 1080p samples, you can see the slow motion samples, you can see the 4K samples, you can see all of that. So that pretty much covers it for the cameras. Now let's keep it moving. Now, in terms of gaming, these perform pretty much the same, but it's a little bit different. Now, the Moto X Pure Edition has the Snapdragon 808 processor with the Adreno, I think it's the 4, let me just pull it up. I don't want to give y'all wrong information. So, yes, it's the Snapdragon 808 processor, which is the octa-core processor, as you can see right there, with the Adreno 418. Whereas the Droid Turbo has the Snapdragon 805 processor with the Adreno 420. Alright? Alright. And when it comes to gaming, guys, both of these devices can pretty much handle any game you throw at them, with one exception. Now, I found that when I tried to load NBA Jam on my Moto X Pure Edition, I get a lot of static and crackliness, and I can play it, but I don't get the sound, and if I do turn the sound up, it sounds very distorted and crackly. Did not have that issue on the Droid Turbo over here, so I'm not entirely sure why that is, but I just had to point that out. Anyways, now let's get into the benchmarks on these guys, and I must say that each of these devices benchmarked pretty well, and y'all already know how I feel about the benchmarks. It's just raw numbers. To have a solid device, You just need an overall solid combination of hardware and software that equates to an overall good user experience. And to pretty much have a good user experience, you just need a smooth experience with no glitches, stutters, or crashes, or with the least amount of that as possible. So right here, jumping into the first benchmark, you can see this is the 3D Mark Ice Storm Unlimited, and it's pretty funny because you can see the Droid Turbo outscored the Moto X Pure Edtion very slightly with a score of 19,345 to, and let me let that focus up, 18,381. That was kind of weird, but I just had to point that out. Moving on, let's talk about N22. And again, more weirdness happens because the Droid Turbo outscored the Motorola Pure Edtion with a score of 81,343 to 56,695. Not really sure what's going on here, but I'm just going to report it as I see it, just so you guys know, because I know there's a lot of people out there who like to see the benchmark numbers, but y'all already know how I feel about it. And again, more weirdness continuing to happen, because the Droid Turbo has handily outscored the Moto X Pure Edtion with a score of 25,321 to 19,880. So I don't know what's going on here, but it is what it is. Now here's where we start to see the Moto X Pure Edtion take back some ground here. This is where you get to see the newer chips and things start to outperform ever so slightly the older chips. Now this is the Volemo benchmark, and this is the metal test, and you can see the Droid Turbo gets spanked very nicely by the Moto X Pure Edtion, and the Moto X Pure Edtion smashes it slightly with a score of 2,419 to the Droid Turbo's 1,844. And you can see this score is in the upper middle, where this gets about second place. Now if we keep moving, this is again in Volemo. This is the multi-core test, and you can see the Driod Turbo gets spanked out again. And the Moto X Pure Edtion wins ever so slightly with a score of 2292 to 1631. So, and you can see the Droid Turbo scores in the bottom middle section, whereas again the Moto X Pure Edtion scores second place. So yeah, and this is where it's kind of close. Now this is the Geekbench 3, and you can see the scores are very, very close. The Moto X Pure Edtion scored a 1,200 for the single core score and a 3,302 for the multi-core score. And the Droid Turbo scored